How do you kill your own mother? I mean, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be some abuse there. You don't just, I'm gonna kill my mother because I want to be with a boyfriend. Like I told my mom when I called my mom and talked to her about it. I said, Mama, I said, I was mad at you before. I said, but I've never, ever in a million years thought about killing you. I said, for me to think about killing you, I said, you'd have had to done some pretty bad stuff to me.
A lot of people can't put themselves in the mindset of where I was at with the abuse and how desperate I felt. So having a statement like she was going to cut my throat, that statement stands out a lot.
It seems Gypsy Rose Blanchard just can't help herself when it comes to telling the truth. And it appears she's attempting to rewrite history with her books and TV series, but it's backfiring big time. As most of you know, Gypsy made headlines back in 2015 when she was arrested for plotting her own mother's demise. When she was released from prison at the end of 2023, Blanchard opted to cash in on her notoriety instead of going away quietly. Part of cashing in is her Lifetime reality TV series and 2 books. Gypsy was supposedly baring her soul and revealing new shocking details. Gypsy was going to tell the truth, finally, about why she had no choice but to murder her own mother. Welcome back to Becca Scoops. My partner is a veteran detective, and I'm Becca, a former psych and ICU RN. And in this video, we will be exposing how Gypsy Rose Blanchard is attempting to gaslight the masses by rewriting her own history and thus rewriting her own crime. Many say money is the root of all evil. And when it comes to the case of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the players surrounding the convicted felon are seemingly guilty of selling their souls for the chance to make a few bucks. It appears as though everyone who got involved with Blanchard after her crime have done so because they saw the potential dollar signs. Christy Blanchard, Gypsy's stepmother, has shown herself to be Gypsy's #1 defender, but not in a good way. Christy seemingly stays on Gypsy's good side so she can continue to cash in. However, Christy claimed publicly she had made nothing when it came to Gypsy's crime. In this audio file, Christy is talking during a TikTok live stream where she claims she makes no money doing interviews and that she wants to write a book herself.
I would be getting paid to do interviews. You're right, I would have been a media whore because I'd have put all that money aside for Gypsy. We didn't even get paid for the
Lifetime
prison confessions or this one. This is money for Gypsy.
Yeah. And so what? The people, and a lot of people saying she's making money off the murder. No, she's not. She's talking about her story.
She's making money off of her life.
Right. She doesn't even talk about that really in the show.
Yeah. It's like I think I talked to Planny about it. I might have even talked to you about. I know I talked to you about it too. Of me, like I want to write a book. Like I want to go back though from where Rod and I met.
However, Christy forgot she messaged Fancy Maselli, who worked with the Blanchard family between 2017 to 2019. Maselli brought out a receipt showing Christy Blanchard's message to her detailing Christy was paid $5,000 for one documentary. But that's not all. We also know it was alleged Christy was paid substantial fees from Good Morning America, 2020, and the Dr. Oz show. And netizens like Brad Anderson remarked, quote, I have seen post after post saying Gypsy's family isn't in this for fame and fortune. I'm sorry, but somebody who isn't interested in fame doesn't list their appearances in documentaries and news interviews as if they were acting roles. He added, she already thinks she's a celebrity for talking about her stepdaughter, who for the majority of her life she was estranged. What do you think? End quote. When news broke in June of 2015 that Gypsy had been arrested for the first-degree murder of her own mother, Christy took control. You see, Christy had become that wife who ran the show, and that's how Gypsy's father, Rod Blanchard, likes it. Christy quickly took to social media to gauge what was public opinion on her stepdaughter. Most know Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother had scammed charities by claiming Gypsy was a sick kid, and the community of Springfield, Missouri, who had helped Dee Dee Blanchard and Gypsy obtain a Habitat for Humanity home, were enraged after learning Gypsy was an adult who could walk. Christy was caught admitting she knew Gypsy could walk all along. After that gaffe and the backlash, Christy read the room, so to speak, and knew to help her husband, she had to help Gypsy. And that's when Christy began a full-blown social media campaign. Immediately, Christy discovered some netizens were speculating about Dee Dee Blanchard possibly having a disorder called Munchausen by proxy. Christy also joined true crime Facebook groups that sprang up dedicated to the case. And Gypsy caught on real fast. She was told by her defense attorney, Mike Stanfield, that the best they could do to ensure the death penalty stayed off the table was to embrace this theory Christy was helping spread online, that her mother, Dee Dee, was medically abusing her and had a disorder called Munchausen by proxy. Let's be clear. Gypsy was in an extraordinarily tough spot. Her defense attorney admitted if she went to trial, he had no real defense to present, and Gypsy would spend the rest of her life in prison.
And we also weren't sure that there was even a defense that we could raise. If we went to trial and we lost, Gypsy would die in prison. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars.
Dee Dee had taught Gypsy about pulling a con, and so Gypsy was well prepared to rewrite her history. And what was Gypsy's new narrative? Well, that she was healthy all her life, but she never knew it, and that her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard, had been this monster who duped numerous medical professionals to perform unneeded surgeries on a healthy Gypsy Rose. Stepmom Christy was vital to Gypsy's defense. Rod, her father, stayed in the background, leaving it to Christy and Gypsy and defense attorney Mike Stanfield to spread the new narrative that Dee Dee had a mental disorder called Munchausen by proxy.
I don't know why these procedures were done or how her mother was able to convince the doctors. Mind-boggling is the only way I can put her ability to manipulate people.
However, they couldn't stop Rod from relaying the truth about Gypsy's condition as a small child.
Right from birth, 3 months old, Dee Dee was telling me that she had sleep apnea, and she needed a breathing machine or breathing monitor machine, which, I mean, till this day, I don't know if that was real or not.
Rod abandoned Gypsy and Dee Dee before his daughter turned 1 year old, so he wasn't present when the alarm to Gypsy's breathing machine went off in the middle of the night. Here's what Dee Dee's father remembers.
After she divorced Rod, Dee Dee moved back with us. And at night, Gypsy had a machine on. The alarm would come on when she stopped breathing. So you had to wake her up. Once you wake her up, the machine would stop. But it was scary.
Our investigation found that Gypsy was truly a sickly child from birth, and Dee Dee was never diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. In her memoir, Gypsy admitted her medical records only date back to the year 2000, when she was 9 years old. However, we know Gypsy had microcephaly, which is a rare genetic condition where a baby is born with a small head. We know this because, according to her medical records, it is something Gypsy still had as an adult in 2013. Additionally, microcephaly is one of the symptoms of the rare chromosomal disorder Gypsy suffers from that she also had at birth. Knowing these facts, Gypsy horribly maligned her mother in her memoir.
I found a chromosome test in one of the boxes of my medical files. It was ordered in 2012 when I was already 20 years old. After a doctor could not find anything wrong with me that would explain the cornucopia of illnesses my mother claimed I had. His last-ditch effort was to consider if my ailments were due to a rare chromosomal defect.
Gypsy claims this chromosomal test was a last-ditch effort to explain her symptoms. That's not true. According to her medical records, due to her microcephaly, failing rigorous swallowing tests, having breathing issues and digestive issues observed by medical professionals during overnight sleep studies, doctors deduced Gypsy had an unspecified genetic disorder. It was those clinical symptoms she suffered from at an early age that led doctors to believe she had a genetic condition that they could not pinpoint at that time. This wasn't anything Dee Dee could make up or Gypsy could fake.
Exploring my medical records was supposed to demystify me, not baffle me even more. Now I had more questions than I had before. Does there somewhere exist a similar chromosome test? One given to me when I was born?
No, there is no similar chromosome test given to Gypsy before she was born. We know this because testing for this rare disorder wasn't possible until 2008. But since Gypsy claims she was researching this, she already knows this. Additionally, there is no way Dee Dee used this rare disorder to scam anyone. She had no idea Gypsy had it. Gypsy wasn't diagnosed with the rare disorder until 2012. All of Gypsy's medical procedures and surgeries predate the 2012 diagnosis.
Was this the one medical issue I had that was true? Did my mother then turn that one truth into 1,000 lies? The rest of my files indicate no abnormalities. So regardless of the actual microdeletion, I had grown up unscathed by it.
We have no idea what Gypsy is referring to when she claims no abnormalities. Gypsy was born with microcephaly and had 2 sleep studies that revealed she needed a breathing machine at night. Additionally, Gypsy had severe issues with her eyes and had to have surgery so she wouldn't go blind.
When I looked in her earlier medical records, Gypsy had strabismus as an infant, which is when one eye or both wander. And over time, you go blind. So you have to have surgery to correct the problem.
In fact, according to Gypsy's medical records, one pulmonologist writes on April 18, 2007, quote, "In summary, the overnight sleep study revealed evidence of significant nocturnal hypoventilation resolved with the nasal CPAP at 5 centimeters water," end quote.
They say the best liars use a hint of truth. Either my mother knew I had this condition before the 2012 test, researched the potential outcomes, and ran with them, or this one time, the disorder she claimed for me turned out to be real, though without real symptoms.
So Gypsy accuses her mother of being some villainous Dr. Evil who miraculously knew about the rare disorder before even medical science did, and then magically made Gypsy manifest the exact symptoms of that rare disorder. Or, if that isn't the truth, then Gypsy says, quote, "This one time, the disorder she claimed I had was real, though without any real symptoms," end quote. Except according to Gypsy's own medical records, ever since her birth, she was exhibiting symptoms of this rare disorder called microdeletion 1q21.1. But before we get to that, let's tell the truth about Dee Dee's role and answer Gypsy's questions about her rare disorder.
Different scenarios keep me up at night. Did she simply read too many baby books when she was pregnant with me and feared all the potential negative outcomes? Did she know she had the same genetic abnormality and presumptuously tell people she had passed it on to me?
Gypsy knows her mother had no way to know about this genetic disorder. The test for the disorder only became available in 2008. Subsequently, she also must know this rare disorder could not be diagnosed in anyone until 2008, meaning Gypsy is seemingly going out of her way to villainize her own mother. Another person Gypsy has been villainizing since she got out of prison is her co-defendant. Most people know Mr. Nicholas Godejohn was Gypsy's internet boyfriend who assisted her in her mother's demise. Nicholas, who has level 2 autism and was on permanent disability, was pressured by Gypsy for over 2 years to partake in the heinous crime. Nick was found guilty of first-degree murder with no possibility of parole. Gypsy is using her large reach on social media to publicize her memoir, which rewrites her history and totally villainizes Mr. Godejohn. Not only is Gypsy now accusing Nick of raping her, something she denied under oath during his trial, she is also contradicting herself when it comes to her own virginity. In the ebook that came out in 2023, Gypsy claims Nick did not take her virginity. She writes, quote, "I wish I had saved the letter to share, but basically Nick said I was committing adultery, that he had taken my virginity, which he didn't," end quote. Then, Gypsy claims in her memoir, her second book that came out in 2024, that in March of 2015, when Nick met her at the movie theater for the Cinderella premiere, she planned to have Nick take her virginity inside the men's bathroom.
At this point, I wanted to give him my virginity, mostly because I wanted that part over with.
Gypsy then claims she, quote, left the movie theater still technically a virgin, end quote. That Nick couldn't perform in the men's bathroom. He found her unappealing wearing a diaper. So, as of March 2015, Gypsy is claiming she is still a virgin. Then, in a text on June 6, 2015, as Gypsy and Nick are just a few days away from doing the heinous crime, Gypsy has sex on her mind. Specifically, she wants to engage in intercourse with another man. If we believe her statements, she is still technically a virgin at this point. Gypsy writes 3 days before her own mother's demise. Honey, I was wondering, say I wanted to have sex with a guy before leaving town, could I? It's just a curious question, LOL. She adds, okay, so I know you're territorial, but I'm being tempted sexually. So Gypsy wants us to believe that she's still a virgin at that point. However, 3 days before her mother's demise, she wants to meet up with a guy at a cupcake place and have sex. Then 3 days later, on June 10th, 2015, Gypsy and Nick do the heinous act of taking Dee Dee's life and end up spending several days together. One infamous video shows the pair in the motel room after the crime.
Hi, honey. I'm doing it. He's eating a brownie. But later he will be eating me.
Then there's Nick's stepfather, who told detectives about how the pair were doing it like rabbits, and he recalled Gypsy's vocal loudness during the intimate act.
Anything else wrong for him? No, all I know is they were freaking going at it like rabbits. Yeah. I had to yell at him. Well, I didn't yell at him. I just asked him politely. I'm like, can you please wait until I go to work or whatever? If I'm up here, because I'm sleeping in his bed.
The point is, Gypsy claims as of March 2015, she was a virgin. According to these videos and Nick's stepdad, by June of 2015, just a few weeks later, Gypsy and Nick were having a pretty active, intimate relationship. The evidence also suggests that Gypsy asking Nick if she can have sex with another man tells us everything about how she sees sex. She also sees the act as a weapon to make men jealous, not as a loving encounter. So, this is a big deal. If we're to take Gypsy at her word, Nick did not take her virginity, period. Gypsy writes that in her ebook. She states she was still a virgin as of March 15, 2015. This leaves only a few-week window between March 15th and June 10th to meet up with another man and lose her virginity. This is important. It is so close to her mother's demise. So, if we believe Gypsy and she was deflowered by another man, not Nick Godejohn, between March and June of 2015. So who is this mystery man? Was he involved in Dee Dee's demise? Or is Gypsy just a horrible, pathological liar who can't keep her story straight? We believe Gypsy's a pathological liar. Through our investigation, we believe Gypsy was sexually active long before she ever met Nicholas Godejohn. But she spins so many webs of deceit that following her threads of untruths becomes a mind-numbing endeavor. But that's not all. Probably one of the most egregious contradictions involves Gypsy's new claim that Mr. Godejohn took her by force. And this is where Gypsy's memoir becomes a filthy, vile, degenerate piece of work. Gypsy wants the public to believe it was Nicholas Godejohn who has this sick intimacy drive that is tied to violence. But there's only one problem with this new accusation. Gypsy's description of these events tells us Nick wasn't the one with the sick intimacy drive. In fact, it appears as if it is Gypsy who has these violent issues. Gypsy claims that after her mother was dead, Nick took her into the bedroom and took her by force. Except, she claims, quote, he didn't seem aroused at all. She adds, there wasn't a moment when Nick finished, per se. There was no moan or release. He just stopped and later said he wasn't getting any pleasure, end quote.
There wasn't a moment when Nick finished, per se. There was no moan or release or semen to wipe off. He just stopped. He said later he wasn't getting any pleasure.
Since law enforcement had the evidence, Gypsy had to admit on the stand that she wrote out many of these intimate, violent fantasies.
These were all fantasies that the two of you had, correct?
Yes, sir.
Collectively.
Yes, sir.
You guys did this with some regularity, correct?
Yes.
And you willingly agreed to make these videos.
Yes.
And you also yourself wrote some letters, some stories to them all set, am I correct?
Yes.
Wrote for him.
Yes.
In her memoir, she claims it was Nick playing out his alleged rape fantasy. However, does that seem square with actual psychological studies that map the mind of sexual offenders? Well, according to the Journal of Clinical and Consulting Psychology, Dr. Howard Barbary conducted testing which showed when men view scenes showing an encounter where a man is forcing a woman, the majority of men's arousal levels decreased. Quote, ordinarily, violence inhibits sexual arousal in men, Dr. Barbary said. A blood flow loss of 50% means a man would not be able to perform the deed, end quote. However, that was not true for men who had been convicted of that ghastly crime. In those men, the study showed the arousal was remarkably stronger to the scene of forcing a woman than to consenting intercourse, Dr. Barbary explained. We see Gypsy describe two freakish encounters with Nick in her book, in the movie theater and after her mother's demise. And both times, Nick can't sustain his blood flow to his organ. Thus, according to these scientific studies, Nick seemingly does not meet the profile of a man who would take a woman against her will. We must caution we are only making assumptions based on the information at hand. We do know, according to sworn testimony from Gypsy's previous boyfriend, the boyfriend before she ever met Godejohn, it was Gypsy who introduced this BDSM role-playing to him. It was Gypsy who wanted this master-submissive relationship back in 2011. And remember, she didn't meet Nick until 2013. One telling video shows Gypsy and her handler, Melissa Moore. Moore asked Gypsy to define certain slang terms. Check out Gypsy's definition of a simp.
Ghosting.
Oh, that means that they never want to talk to you again.
Simp?
Oh, that means someone that's a submissive.
Oh, like BDSM?
Kind of.
Okay.
Gypsy also has a tendency to tell on herself. She explains Nick lost arousal twice, at the movie theater, where he could have exerted dominance, but his organ went limp, and then after Dee Dee's demise, when Gypsy claims he took her by force, but then contradicts an essay scenario by admitting he wasn't aroused.
There wasn't a moment when Nick finished, per se. There was no moan or release or semen to wipe off. He just stopped. He said later he wasn't getting any pleasure.
Is it possible it was Nick who was the one doing what turned Gypsy on? The evidence suggests this could be the case. Other evidence, including Gypsy's choice of the knife to do away with her mother, posing with knives in her role-playing, and picking up a loaded BB gun she thought was a real firearm and pumping 10 rounds into her mother, suggests Gypsy is the one with a penchant for violently acting out. And the posing with a knife in an erotic way can be an indicator that she may find that extremely arousing. In fact, Gypsy has changed her story once again about shooting her mom to ensure it isn't seen as too violent.
So did you think it was a real gun?
No, I knew it was a BB gun. Okay. Which, in certain documentaries and transcripts and stuff like that, some people are like, oh, well, she didn't know it was a BB gun. No, I knew it was a BB gun.
Okay.
So.
However, during her Lifetime series, Gypsy admitted she thought it was a real firearm.
When I shot my mother, I just remember thinking like, oh my God, did I just do that? What did I just do? A couple of them hit her, a couple of them hit the wall, but the wounds were superficial. They barely grazed her. That's when I realized it was a BB gun.
Additionally, stepmom Christy's reaction to such a display of violence toward a woman who was ultimately murdered leaves us speechless.
Gypsy tells a story about picking up a BB gun and shooting Dee Dee 10 times with it.
I don't know about
You don't know
that.
the story? She thought she killed her?
No, there are some things Gypsy said she wants to talk to us about in person.
Okay.
So there's things that y'all probably know that we don't know. But good for her.
Gypsy's former boyfriend, Dan Glidewell, testified during Nick's appeal in 2022. Glidewell's relationship dates back to 2011 when Gypsy was 19 years old. This would be 2 years before she met Nick Godejohn. According to court testimony, quote, Glidewell states that their relationship was developed from friendship to a sexual relationship. They would send explicit videos to each other. He discusses how they role-played occasionally. He says he developed a taste for power exchange role-playing from her. He says she would send nude photos, dress up in costumes, and use various fictitious names, end quote. Another interesting potential piece of evidence involving Gypsy Rose Blanchard's taste for power exchange role-playing has to do with some artwork. We must stress that we could not confirm if this artwork is Gypsy Rose Blanchard's. What we know is Gypsy had a Facebook account with the same name, Snow Gypsy. We also know this artwork account has as its profile pic a cute little dog that oddly resembles Pixie, the canine Malshi breed Gypsy was adamant she and her former husband purchased together. The point? Many dog owners like a certain breed. We also looked at handwriting samples, but even though the writing was very similar to known writings from Gypsy's ebook, we cannot say for sure they match. However, given that Gypsy's former boyfriend testified under oath about her penchant for BDSM role-playing, we find these pictures very interesting. Published on August 31st of 2013, one character named Gypsy is a healer who keeps, quote, a bag of medicine and knives. According to the author, the backstory of this character is, quote, Gypsy one day wandered into town where she had befriended a white girl, and the head found out. Enraged, he dragged her into the woods with his men. He raped her and branded a W into her shoulder to show she was a traitor to their clan, and after beating her, he left her to his men, who were just as merciless. Another pic shows a woman named Chrissy, who kind of resembles Gypsy's evil character, Ruby. Another pic dated January 15, 2012 shows a woman or girl with a leash and a collar of some sort sitting on a man's lap. It's titled, "A Master and His Pet." Again, we cannot tie Gypsy to this artwork. However, we do know on June 23rd, 2015, about 10 days after Gypsy was arrested, one of the followers of this artwork page warned Snow Gypsy that this account was being tied to Gypsy Rose Blanchard. There was no response, and the page has not had any activity since Gypsy's arrest. Gypsy also reveals when she shot her mother, she also grabbed a knife she calls a dagger. Again, here we see the knife theme. Gypsy seemingly has issues with knives, and it appears to cross over into her intimate fantasy life. It also says something about her psychologically. Choosing that dagger as the weapon for her own mother's demise takes on new meaning. Gypsy makes the claim that she had no idea what BDSM was or this master submissive fantasy life until Nick Godejohn came along.
Nick exposed me to a lot of sexually perverse things and ideas, but 10 years later, knowing now what I know about sex, he taught me all wrong. From what I've read, he didn't have an accurate idea of BDSM, bondage, discipline, submission, and masochism, and he made it up as we went along. The BDSM stuff made me cringe.
However, we have the sworn testimony of her alleged former lover, Mr. Glidewell. We also know Gypsy's violent. She picked up a gun and shot her mom 10 times. This tells us it's Gypsy who had the history of violent tendencies, not Mr. Godejohn. Nick's mother's reaction to the question if her son was ever violent says it all.
I mean, the thing is, he's a good kid. I've never had any problems with him.
Has he ever become angry with you and assaulted you or anything?
Absolutely not. No way. He would never. No way. No way. Gets a little frustrated, but when he gets frustrated, he'll just cry. Okay. Oh, no way. He's never been violent. That's what's so shocking.
Did Nick learn that Gypsy had violent, intimate fantasies and he was on board to fulfill that? That's a possibility. In the aftermath, Gypsy seemingly changes the narrative to claim it was all Nick and that Nick took her by force just minutes after Dee Dee was gone. Gypsy also changes her story once again. Gypsy claims she lied on the stand under oath when she was asked about that intimate encounter.
Did Nick ever rape you?
No.
And when you guys had sex after your mother, was that consensual?
It started out as consensual, yes.
What do you mean it started out as consensual?
I told him to stop during sex, and he did not.
So you agreed to have something consensual?
Yes.
Then, in her book, she says,
At Nick's trial, the defense asked me if Nick raped me. And I said no, because I felt like that's what I had to say. I heard the attorney say to me, "You agreed to it. You said that you knew you'd be raped that night, so you wanted it."
No attorney said any such thing to Gypsy while on the stand. This is another alleged blatant lie. Another blatant inconsistency in Gypsy's story has to do with why her mom had to die. During her Dr. Phil interview, Gypsy talked about what triggered her to go ahead with her mother's demise.
And I had an upcoming surgery, and I didn't want to have it, so I asked her, "Please tell the doctor I don't need this surgery. I've had it 20 times before. Why do we have to have it again?" And she's like, "There's nothing I can do about it. The doctor wants it." And so I became very numb to Plan B. And I talked to Nick. He had me talk to Victor, who initially was the one that was going to do it. And he was like, "Ask Victor, please." And I said, "Victor, will you please come tell my mother for me, because I can't do it myself."
So, Gypsy tells Dr. Phil that a surgery she had many, many times before was the final straw that caused her to beg Nick to assist her with her mother's demise. The new story Gypsy is selling in her memoir is that Dee Dee was so sadistic, she was going to cut Gypsy's throat by cajoling surgeons to do exploratory surgery on her larynx.
This unnecessary exploratory surgery on my voice box felt most threatening to me. Any slip of the hand could leave me voiceless, mute forever. This is what I believed. This is what I felt. This is when the thought finally came. It's me or her.
No one we've been in contact with has ever seen this medical record about doing an exploratory surgery on Gypsy's larynx. Gypsy claims this was the new point of no return for her.
When we got home from that appointment with the ENT, I took 3 Oxy and craved the fantasy world Nick and I lived in. I messaged him. Do you remember when you told me you'd protect me from people who want to hurt me? I asked Nick over text. Yes, darling. Will you still protect me? Yes, Nick answered. Even from my mother? Yes.
Additionally, since Gypsy's arrest in 2015, no one has heard about this so-called exploratory surgery. We hear nothing about this game-changing traumatic event in Gypsy's life. It's not mentioned in any of Gypsy's numerous interviews over the years. Neither do we find it in her own documentary, Mommy Dead and Dearest. In 10 years, Gypsy never reveals this alleged traumatic event that caused her to believe it's her or me. Not once has Gypsy ever revealed this most horrendous event in her life. Not to detectives, not to her attorneys, to help her get a plea deal. However, we're now to believe this is the truth. You be the judge and make up your own mind. Is this new narrative about Dee Dee Blanchard true? Was Dee Dee looking to cut Gypsy's throat? According to the convicted felon, another reason she got her sweet plea deal was because Dee Dee had caused Gypsy to become so malnourished.
County Prosecutor Dan Patterson announced he would not seek the death penalty for either me or Nick, calling the case extraordinary and unusual. Patterson also took into account my abuse, marked by my noticeable malnourishment, and agreed to allow me to plead guilty to a lesser crime of second-degree murder.
In her memoir, Gypsy describes in depth that her mother was depriving her from sustenance. Well, is that the truth? We decided to investigate this claim, since Gypsy states her so-called malnourishment was one reason she got her sweet plea deal. On May 29, 2013, Gypsy is 21 years old. Her weight is 44.8 kilograms, which is 99 pounds, and her body mass index, or BMI, is 1929. A BMI of 1929 is considered a healthy weight range for young and middle-aged adults. On September 1st, 2009, Gypsy is 18 years old and her weight is 103 pounds. During an ER visit on April 18, 2007, which Gypsy has a hacking cough, the doctor writes about appearance. Quote, well-nourished, well-developed appearing young lady was lying quietly on the gurney, end quote. So by the time Gypsy has reached her full height of 4 feet 11, her weight stabilized between 103 to 98 pounds, which is considered healthy. This notion that Gypsy was being starved by her mother is ludicrous. Gypsy's weight and height was charted many times during her life, and never did medical professionals report Gypsy being malnourished. However, it's true Gypsy had eating and feeding issues from an early age. Because of her chromosomal disorder, that led to her feeding tube placement. One report from 2004 talks about how her feeding tube was placed in 2000 after she had difficulty swallowing. Another report from 2004 states Gypsy could not swallow thin liquids. The medical team observed her gagging and coughing all consistency of food. Gypsy also had issues with too much saliva in her mouth, and this was documented by a physician who wrote, quote, oral cavity exam reveals very moist mucosa with pooling of saliva in the floor of her mouth, end quote. The doctor diagnosed Gypsy with hypersalivation. This wasn't something Dee Dee made up. It's documented in Gypsy's medical records after doctors did their own exams on her. Gypsy admits in her memoir she woke up drooling. However, we know Gypsy accuses Dee Dee of using Orajel on her gums prior to these doctors' appointments, claiming this caused her to drool excessively.
She put Orajel on my gums to make me drool, so she'd have doctors believe my salivary glands were not working properly.
There's just one huge problem with this accusation. The active ingredient in Orajel, called benzocaine, does not cause hypersalivation or drooling. However, it's true some Orajel products do have a minimal amount of menthol, and menthol in larger quantities can increase salivation. But nowhere do we find a side effect of Orajel is excessive drooling. However, using too much benzocaine can be life-threatening. So if Dee Dee really did drench Gypsy's gums with Orajel, this may have triggered some pretty serious complications that would have manifested in front of medical professionals. Another glaring untruth surrounds the CPS visit Gypsy dates as October 26, 2009. Gypsy previously claimed the social workers and police officer present didn't ask her the right questions.
I remember, Gypsy, we had discussed that CPS came to your house at one point. Remind me about that. Yeah, tell us about that.
So they did come to my house, and basically they were asking me the wrong questions. So they're like, show me your arms, show me your legs. And they were checking for bruises. And at that point, my mom never hit me. They wasn't asking the right questions to me.
Now we have a new narrative as Gypsy changes her story once again.
I was not drugged the day the woman from the Department of Family Services, DFS, gave us a surprise visit on October 26, 2009. I get how this has become another situation that people ask about with frustration. Why didn't you tell them anything when you had the chance? I didn't think my life was odd at the time. This was before I had access to a laptop.
So Gypsy's new narrative is that she didn't believe her life was odd because she had no access to a laptop. So she said nothing to the social workers or the police officer. Remember, this CPS visit is October 26, 2009. However, in another chapter, she admits she had access to a laptop at 18 years old.
I didn't know I could think for myself until I began to search the internet with an HP notebook laptop. I was told the computer was a gift from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society one Christmas when I was real age 18.
Gypsy once again tells contradicting stories about her access to a computer. Gypsy also claims she had no idea about her age or having a social security number when she was arrested.
They cuffed me behind my back and sat me on the hood of a police car, firing off question after question. What's your name? How old are you? What's your social security number? I told them I was Gypsy Rose Blanchard, with an E at the end, and that I was 19. I was really about a month shy of 24, the same age my mother was when she had me. I had no clue about my social security number.
Except, just hours after she was taken into custody, she wanted her social security card back.
What is going to happen to me?
Okay.
And two, am I going to be sent back to Missouri? Can I get my luggage with money and my social security cards, my insurance card, and things like this?
Why lie about these things? Well, we believe Gypsy fits the 10 criteria of a pathological liar. Embellishing lies with extensive details, telling dramatic and highly unlikely stories, appearing anxious while talking, getting defensive when confronted about a lie, constantly changing the story or being vague when questioned, lying about something even when there's no reason to, seeming unconcerned with being caught in a lie, feeling a high when they get away with lying, passing off a story someone else told as their own, acting in ways that don't match their words. So pathological liars lie for no reason and are constantly changing their story. This may seem crazy to you or me, but to those who have problems telling the truth to this degree, they really don't understand why they do it themselves. Lastly, we found it in bad taste that Gypsy had the audacity to speak about Nicholas Godejohn's mother's death without any real emotion.
Right. Okay. And have you talked to her since the night of the crime?
She has passed away.
Everyone has passed away.
Yeah, she, ironically enough, she passed away in June around the same time that the anniversary of the crime happened. And it was overdose.
Oh, wow.
Nicholas Godejohn's mother, Stephanie Goldammer, passed away on June 13th, 2021. She was 52 years old. Claudinia Blanchard was 48 years of age when her life was taken on June 10th, 2015. Is it a coincidence that Stephanie passed away from an overdose so close to the day Dee Dee died? We think not. For many, dates, time of year, the season, the anniversary of a traumatic event can be an extremely triggering sensation. But what makes this worse is Gypsy's nonchalant attitude. It seems Gypsy does not feel any guilt or understand the correlation between her own actions and what happened to many of the peripheral players like Stephanie Goldammer. Nick's mother sensed something was wrong the night of the crime. Frantic, she attempted several times to contact her autistic son. That's when Gypsy laid on her southern charms by reassuring the worried mom, messaging, "He's perfectly good, Mrs. Stephanie." One philosopher wrote, "Eventually, we all have to accept full and total responsibility for our actions, everything we have done and have not done." The late great king of rock, Elvis Presley, said, "Truth is like the sun. You can shut it out for a time, but it ain't going away." Thanks for watching Becca Scoops. If you got this far, please like and share and leave us a comment. We read them all. Thanks again.